slides as well. And I am going to do a quick introduction and turn it over so that Christina has the most time. So this morning, afternoon, evening, from wherever you're dialing in, we are so happy to welcome Christina Chandler to our third session in this series about applying to universities, exploring universities around the world. And Australia, I think we can all anticipate Australia maybe becoming a little bit more popular in the coming year or two or three or five. So it's great that we have an expert on our side here, and we'll be sharing a lot about the overall experience and of applying to universities in Australia today. And then we'll be available for questions during our session, and then in the future she'll share her information. But Christina is a seasoned IEC with extensive experience with the Australian university system, and through her work at Chandler Educational Consulting, she's helped counselors and families understand the academic, financial, and cultural aspects of study in Australia. Having lived and worked across the globe, Christina brings a unique international perspective to her advising. Her sessions are informative, approachable, and packed with insights tailored specifically for school-based counselors and IECs. So I want to give a very warm welcome to Christina, not only for her work with families and students, but also the work that she's done with the International Admissions, IACAC, the International Association of College Admissions Counseling, and just sharing so much PD and valuable information with us. So Christina, I will turn it over to you, and we can't wait to hear from you.
Thank you. Hi, everybody, and welcome from a very chilly morning here in Melbourne, Australia. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen so that we can take as much time as possible. Please feel free to have a whole lot of questions left over for me. As Melissa said, I am an IEC based in Australia. You can probably hear my American accent coming right through. So I have worked with the US higher ed organizations as well as Australian universities for a number of years. I want to say I've worked, I started when I was 4 and worked for about 25 years. But that would be lying about my age. So let's get started with talking about Australia. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen and get going with the presentation. All right. So we'll talk a little bit today about Australia in general, and we'll go into the application process for Australian universities, and then I'll be happy to answer any additional questions you've got. So our list of topics today, hopefully we'll be able to cover absolutely everything. Why you might choose Australia is a big one. A little bit of what to know about the universities and the application process as well. The important question about cost and what it will cost to live here as well as attend universities. A little bit of student life, and then where to find some more information. So let's start off with, what do we know about Australia? It's this really cool place to live. We have great beaches. We have some really cool features. We have crazy animals. You probably all know your koalas, kangaroos, emus, maybe. Uluru is a sacred site right smack in the middle of the country. And I was just fortunate enough to visit last month. So I've included a picture of Uluru there. But it is a very interesting country, very diverse, and a huge country full of opportunities. So when your students are thinking about maybe Australia, New Zealand, other cool places, there are some other features that we need to talk to them about. So one of the biggest questions, especially for the parents, safety. How safe is it? And I know that a lot of people know about snakes and spiders and sharks. You rarely see them. Snakes, I think I've seen 2 in the last 8 years. I've never seen a shark. And the spiders, a can of bug spray takes care of that. But safety in general, as you're moving about the city or you're on the university campus, Safety is a really big factor here in Australia. And you notice it from day one. As soon as you arrive in the country, people are wearing high-vis, bright yellow or bright orange vests, and there are signs everywhere for safety. We really take it seriously here in Australia. There are a lot of safety precautions taken. One of the big factors that you will notice here, we don't have guns. There are no guns on the streets. We don't have a lot of shootings. Um, there was a massacre about 30 years ago, and the government instilled a buyback program for weapons. So people don't carry weapons in Australia. They are used only for hunting. They are closely monitored and registered. So there is that big safety factor here. There's a very, very low crime rate in Australia, same for New Zealand. We're not a very heavily populated country, so we've got a handful of big cities, but low crime, which is nice. Moving on through this list, the quality of education is top notch. If you are monitoring all of the world rankings, you will see Australian universities right up there with other universities around the world. And within our universities, many of them have specific programs that are really, really highly ranked, really high quality, and you've got a great opportunity here. There's a wide variety of options for students. So many of your students may be looking to go directly into a bachelor's or master's program, as well as PhDs. But there are also options for students who need to come and brush up on their English, or they may need what we call a diploma course, which is bridging to university, or even a foundation course, which is that gap between year 12 and the first year of university. So students do have many different options. When they start looking around here, they can kind of search by the type of program they want, the level of support they need, and the locations, of course. Every university campus here has student support services. So we want to make sure that our students are happy, healthy, well looked after, they're successful in their classes. So there's academic support, of course. There's also physical and mental health support. There are student activities, there's well-being program, everything you could imagine that a student might need, especially for the international students who are living far from home here. The application system is easy. It's very direct. We don't have a holistic admissions program in Australia. Everything is based on your transcripts and your English scores, and that's about it. So it's a lot less work for the counselors, which is really nice. Students are able to work while they're studying here. So during the school term, students can work about part-time. It's usually 48 hours within a 2-week period. When school is out of session, they can work full-time. And minimum wage here in Australia is about 24 Australian dollars per hour. If you do the calculation, I think that's around 16 US dollars. So students typically make about 28, 30, even more in certain jobs. So it's enough for them to cover a lot of their personal expenses. Research opportunities are huge here because many of the universities connect with local industry to provide those research opportunities for students. So if they're going into a master's or a PhD, they definitely are going to be doing some research here. But also many of the universities are connected globally. So I always talk about some of our big research institutions and our international connections. And we've got universities here that are connected to Southeast Asia, connected to the US, Canada, all of Europe. So we have really strong international connections for the universities as well. Australia also has a very high standard of living. So just what you would expect in the US or Europe, our standard of living here is very similar to that. And of course, there's always the benefit of cool animals in Australia. So to look at the map here, you'll see the map of Australia. Now, keep in mind that the geography of Australia is we're about the same size as the US. So from east to west, it's almost the same as east to west in the US, but we are sparsely populated in comparison. So if you look at this map, you'll see the city names that are in bold print. Those are the state capitals, and many of the universities are based in or around each state capital. So starting from way over in the west, you've got Perth in Western Australia, and there are 5 universities in Perth. Up in the north is Darwin in the Northern Territory. Down the south is Adelaide. There are 2 universities in Adelaide. There have been 3 in the past, and 2 of them just merged. So we've got 2 universities now in Adelaide. And near Adelaide is Melbourne, where I'm based. We've got 9 universities all around Melbourne and the state of Victoria. A little hard to see, right in the middle is ACT and the capital of Canberra. That's the country's capital. There are 2 universities there as well. Moving north from that is Sydney. Sydney's got a wealth of universities, and they extend throughout New South Wales to cover all of the regional areas. And a little further north from there is Brisbane. And Brisbane, Gold Coast, and Sunshine Coast have numerous university campuses. And again, they spread throughout Queensland. Down in Tasmania, our little island state, there is 1 university, but they've got multiple campuses. So where you see all these little dots around the country are the regional campuses. The universities make a concerted effort to reach out to those more remote areas so that students don't have to drive 3, 4, 5 hours to get to a university campus. There are 42 universities here, and 37 of those are public, so they do receive some government support. 3 of them are private Australian universities, and we have 2 private international universities as well. So as your students are looking at Australia and they're looking at the rankings, they'll find that group of 8. The group of 8 is spread throughout the country, and they are the top ranked universities. But if they're only looking at 8, they're leaving out a lot because they have 42 different options here. So I always like to make sure that students are seeing that number of 42. Now, for the application process, I often recommend that people start with the Study Australia website. This is a government-sponsored website, so it's all the most accurate information. It's got everybody listed there. It has all the different options. But in addition to finding a university or figuring out the process, it also has a lot of really good information about living in Australia, about the costs, about the culture as well. So it's a great place for people to start their journey looking for their studies in Australia. Now let's talk a little bit about the timeline. I've shown you a map here for Australia itself, and you can see we're front and center, right up at the top of the world. So I use this map because we follow a timeline that goes from January to December. Our school year actually begins at the beginning of the year. Typically, the universities begin in late February to early March. The secondary schools actually start January. And we finish up near the end of the year around November or December. So very different timeline from much of the Northern Hemisphere where you're starting around August or September. We flip that and start early in the year. For semester 1, the applications may open considerably earlier, but semester 1 starts again late February, early March, depending on the university. International students should be looking at applying a minimum of 3 months in advance, because they'll need time to process all of their documents and apply for that international student visa. The student visa could take a few days to a week, or it could take a couple of months. So we always recommend that students apply well in advance. Semester 2 is what we call our mid-year intake. And that one usually begins in late July. For some universities, it could be early August. This one is actually quite popular with international students. So if you have a student who's finished their studies in May or June, and they already have their transcripts, they've got their final scores, they could apply for July intake. They need to act quickly to make sure they've got enough time to get their student visa. But July is a perfectly good time to come here. Keep in mind, it's the middle of winter as well. And for accommodation, at Australian universities, domestic students typically do not live on campus. So our Australian students tend to live at home and commute to their university. So it is primarily the regional students coming from a few hours drive away, or international students who are living in student accommodation. We have a handful of domestic students there, but it is typically our international students in the accommodation. Most of our universities use a third-party organization for accommodation. That might be like UniLodge or Scape or Igloo. There are a few different companies that run student accommodation. They might be based on the campus or quite near campus. Or if you're at a city campus, it may be based somewhere in the city where students often like to live. We always recommend students apply for accommodation as early as possible to make sure they get their first preference. Now, I've mentioned a couple of times looking at the university website. So when you get ready to have your student apply, you want to select the course. The course is the major or the program of study, and find it at the university where it's offered. So not every university offers all of the same courses, just like in the US. So you'll do a quick search to find where that course is offered. You check the entry requirements for that particular university because, again, they'll vary from one to another. And then you're going to apply to the course at that university. So a little different from the US system where you're applying to the university itself. Here you are applying to that course of study. So I've put an example on this page from Newcastle University. At Newcastle, we're going to study a Bachelor of Education for secondary to become a high school teacher. And I've listed here that I'm a student with a qualification from China. So in that drop-down menu where it says China, you'd be able to select your country, whatever country you're coming from, whether it's the US, China, Singapore, Italy, wherever else we're coming from, you can select that. And then they will say, okay, here's your national curriculum, here's an IB curriculum, here's the A levels, and they'll have a list showing what they accept. Most universities select a wide variety of international curriculum. So for a student who's done their studies in China, they could use the Gaokao, they could use the IB diploma, they could use their A levels. If they've studied in the US, they'll use their US high school diploma. They may be eligible for credit from their APs. If they've got an IB diploma, they can use that. And everything will be listed there. Keep in mind for US high school diplomas, many universities ask for an SAT score in addition. Okay, so you'll want to check the university websites to make sure that you've got the right requirements, prerequisites, any other information, as well as the fees, the tuition fees for the year and scholarships that are offered. And if you have a student who's applying, they may get a response from the university indicating that they need to use an agent. Most Australian universities recruit students through agents, and depending on the student's citizenship, their passport citizenship, they may be required to apply through an agent, and that is directly linked to their student visa. So going back to that Study Australia website, there's a great cost of living calculator that's just been developed in the past year. And the cost of living calculator gives students an estimate of what they're going to need to budget for. It is currently only for the capital cities all around the country, but it is being developed to include other regional areas as well. So that's a great way to kind of estimate what you're going to be spending throughout the year. Keeping in mind that as students apply for their international student visa, they need to plan on a specific dollar amount in the bank for the visa. At the moment, that is 29,710 Australian dollars that needs to be listed on their student visa application. Their tuition and scholarships might range. So I did a quick search around to a number of different universities, and on average, we range from about 23,000 to 58,000 Australian dollars per year for tuition. So again, if you do the calculation, that's much lower in US dollars. So if your families or students are thinking in the US dollar context, we are quite a bit cheaper here, but that is per year for a 3-year bachelor's degree. So again, it drops the price quite a bit, which is always nice for moms and dads to hear. The scholarships here are a little bit more limited. So scholarships tend to range between 15 and a maximum of 30% for most international students. There are a handful of 50% or 100% scholarships, and those will require a separate application for that scholarship. Now, for student life, I went through the Study Australia pages and pulled a handful of images. I could tell you all about what students do here, and it is the same across every country in the world. They hang out with their friends, they go to the beach, they play games, they chat, they get a coffee. They mix and mingle as much as students anywhere do. So student life here is not very different from student life in most other countries. They will have, for example, that picture in the top center with students playing table tennis. That'll be in the accommodation or kind of the student center where they tend to just hang out and relax together. In the bottom left, that is a student who's showing off one of the race cars that her team has built. Many of the the Australian universities now are getting into race cars and competing against other universities, getting into sort of the Formula One atmosphere. And so student life here can be as varied as a student wants. We've got lots of different activities going on. As I said, the university campuses try to provide enough support services so that students aren't getting too bored, they're not feeling lonely, they're making friends, they're getting out and discovering their local area or the different parts of the country. So a couple of last tips here for the counselors. Keep in mind that our academic year runs from about January, February through November or December. So our winter break here is in June and July. Right now, it is very cold in Melbourne and Sydney. We're wearing our winter jackets these days. Our summer holidays coincide with Christmas and the New Year. So it is a completely flipped schedule. The applications to Australia are relatively simple. You might run into some glitches here and there, but in general, you're applying directly to the course of study. You'll need your school transcripts and proof of English proficiency. That English proficiency might just be that they've been studying in an English language school, they've been studying in the US or Canada, but it might also require either a TOEFL or IELTS, Pearson test of English, and in some cases, Duolingo. Students can submit their test scores or prerequisite requirements if they are needed. And many Australian universities, as I mentioned before, they may require an agent to process the application. And again, that is directly linked to the student being able to get their student visa. So very often a university will send back a note saying, we can't take a direct application, you'll need to go through an agent. And they provide a list of agents that they work with for student applications. So I'll leave this up here for just a minute if you want to scan those QR codes. The first one is the Study Australia website, which I highly recommend just to get familiar with our universities and a little bit about life here in Australia. The second one is the Australian Government, Department of Home Affairs. That is where you will find the information about student visas, and you can go through a checklist there to make sure you've got everything you need. And the last one is my own website, where I've got a handful of resources for students or counselors. You can check out a couple of different locations. I'm still adding more locations as we go along, as I go around the country to visit universities. But you'll find a little bit more of kind of that back and forth between Australian and American terminology or ways of doing things here. So feel free to scan those QR codes, or I can put them back up afterwards if you like. And if you've got any more questions, you can email me or find my website there. And I will stop here for a moment. And I'll stop sharing my screen, but if you need the QR codes, I can put them back. So thank you.
Thank you, Christina. I'm typing my second question in the chat. So we did have two questions about do students from China need to use an agent? And then is the agent at an additional cost? And then I was typing in two other questions of my own,
Sure.
even though I'll be reading
So
them.
the requirement for using an agent depends on the university. Many of those group of 8 or those top ranked universities do not require an agent, but students from China typically do. They very often go through an agent anyway, just to have the extra help with the application process and the visa process. The agent often is required for the visa process because they need to do all the vetting of the students' financial documents, their local transcripts, things like that. So it will depend on the university. I always tell counselors, go ahead and have your student apply. And if the university requires that they need an agent, they'll let you know.
Okay, perfect. I think I'll put the Elizabeth's question before mine, but the residential colleges, which is great insight. Are there schools that maybe have residential colleges, or do they all have them, or what can we know? Because we know that's a big component for our international students who are coming.
Yeah, so some of the universities have residential colleges, and I think this is the more of the British system that you've got in mind for residential college. A few of the universities have them, and those tend to be more of the group of 8. So I know University of Melbourne has them, where students live in a certain place and they kind of stay together. They do a lot of their studies together. That tends to be their kind of their home for the 3 years that they're studying their bachelor's degree. Not all universities do that. So the majority of our universities here just have student accommodation either on campus or nearby. And those student accommodation centers are run by a third-party organization. It's a business. The most common one that I remember working with is called Unilodge. And Unilodge is a company that runs student accommodation, and they provide all of the services that you would expect. For example, at a US campus, you'd have your dormitory, you'd have your RA, you'd have some student activities. It'd be all the same in Unilodge. They provide the same services for our students as well.
And I put that link in the chat, the Unilodge, because I've never heard of it. It's great.
Oh, okay. Great.
This might be, I'm actually going to ask more like the course of study. Like, are there courses of study? Like, if our students say, I want to study medicine or law or something like this, that we, like when we're advising students for med school in the Netherlands, like we know that without being able to speak the language, eventually that's not going to probably work. I know language might not be the barrier, but are there courses of study that our students really can't pursue as international students?
Not really. Um,
Okay.
so for things like medicine, medical, dental, veterinary, those big health programs, they can, but there are different hoops to jump through. First, the tuition fees are much higher than what I listed in my presentation. They will need to take some sort of a medical school admission test.
Hmm.
And there is an international one for non-Australian students. Um, and they'll need to probably sit an interview as well. So they
Hmm.
do need to go through a little different application process for medical school, and it is very, very competitive. There are a very limited number of seats that are reserved for international students at our medical and dental schools here in Australia. So yeah, there are different hoops to jump through. But in terms of a program that an international student would not be allowed to study, that gets into more of a sort of a political issue, a government issue, and it would be the same in the US. Yeah, you wouldn't have a student from particular countries, unfriendly countries, coming here to
Hmm.
study the inner workings of the Australian government or nuclear systems or something like that. It's going to be much more on that political level. So in general, no, there's nothing you could not study here.
Okay. Degrees, are they mostly 3 or 4 years? That was a
A
question.
bachelor's degree is 3 years.
Mm. Yep.
So it's more similar to the British system in that way.
Yep.
There are some bachelor's degrees that are 4 years. They're considered an honors degree. So that fourth year pushes a student a little bit more towards their master's, and they tend to do a bit of research in that fourth year. But for the
Okay.
most part, your bachelor's degrees are all 3 years here.
Mhm. When I had students in the British system, I used to say Australia is like America and the UK had a child, and that is the Australian education system. Because it's kind of like a
Yeah,
hybrid, like the
yeah,
process and entry requirements versus being able to explore in the residential colleges. I'm reminded it's like a hybrid in a way. It's also
it
very far
is.
away from where most people are living. Yeah.
It is. That's true.
Um,
Melissa, I was
any
gonna,
other?
if I could just jump in on
Yeah.
your comment, because I was typing in a very similar question. Is
Yeah.
there anything you can describe for us? I don't know how to phrase this, but like, what is the academic vibe of like actually being a student in Australia? Is it more the British, you just go for your tutorials and then you're left on your own, or is it more the American system? Could you kind of walk us through those? I think we're all familiar with the US system, but is there any
Yep.
other difference?
Yeah, it is, as you mentioned, it is a little bit of that, a little bit more independent. So because the university systems were set up with domestic students in mind, students will typically be on campus about 3 days a week, and they're going to their classes on campus, and then they're going home. A lot of our domestic students live at home and only go in for those couple of days a week when they've got classes, and then they work. They typically work part-time or full-time while they're in school. So students go in, they have their primary class, maybe their lecture or their primary class with a professor. They have tutorials, which are where they kind of delve more deeply into the material. And so they may have 4 actual classes and 4 tutorials throughout the week. So they'll have 8 sessions where they're in contact with the class and the material, half of that with their professor and half with whoever's leading the tutorial. It's often like a TA. So yeah, they're doing a little bit of that. And then the study time is either in a small group with other students or it's on their own. They do try to have a certain amount of group study, group projects, that more American style of getting together, in a small group and working on a project. But for the most part, there's a lot of independent study that goes on.
Sorry, I was muted. Are there online courses or in person mostly?
There are online courses, but for international students, those are limited because the
Okay.
international student visa requires that students do more than 2/3 of their classes in person.
Okay. And then is it, sorry, like internships, co-ops, are those built into the courses of study, or is it more like the work, like you were talking earlier about being able to have jobs?
So it's a little bit of both. If a student
Okay.
wants a part-time job, if they want to go work at the local cafe or work somewhere on campus, they can definitely do that. But there are also internships. Some of those are built in certain programs. You will have like a work integrated learning. You'll see WIL as a term in some of the websites. There will be work integrated learning so that they're getting hands-on experience. Students can also apply for different internships or co-ops, and that will be supported by the department where they're studying. So the engineering department, for example, would have a list of different internships available for students.
Okay. Okay, any questions I did not answer or any new questions, feel free to unmute yourself or type them in the chat.
I do
Um,
have some more questions.
yeah,
I'd
yeah.
like to know, here in the States, many of the universities cap the percentage of international students. Others see them as more of a cash benefit, shall we say. And my second question is, here in the States, there are particular majors that if I was working with an international student, like engineering, business, or computer science are just the most popular majors across the country and therefore just more difficult in general. Does the Australian system publish which majors are more competitive so that I can give my students context?
Great questions, great questions. So to your first one about caps, caps has become a little bit of a dirty word here. So we've had the overall caps for universities. It's a way of limiting the number of new international students coming into the country. It was a huge political issue in our recent elections. People were complaining about having too many international students in the country and affecting housing and all of this. So in terms of caps, there has been a certain type of limit put on universities overall. So each university will have a fixed number of international students that they can enroll per year. But in terms of the number of international students that a university can have, up until then, there has not been that limit. So you'll find universities here in Australia with 25, 30, up to 40% international. So there's wide range for it. The universities that have those higher percentages of international students tend to see the bulk of those students coming from just a handful of countries. So our top sending countries here are China, India, Nepal, and then it goes into Southeast Asia and a little bit of Latin America. For Latin America, the majority of our students are coming in for English programs and then continuing on to universities. So the caps on the numbers are, you'll see them more at the group of 8, and you'll see a much better opportunity at the non-group of 8 universities. And that's why I always show that map with 42 universities, so not just 8. And then in terms of the popular majors, yes, the popular majors here tend to be those ones that you've mentioned with business, commerce, engineering, computer science, and they are the majors that are going to get you a job. So for students graduating from an Australian university, they're allowed to stay on for work experience for a couple of years. And students tend to stay 2 or even 3 years. And if they get sponsored by an employer, they can stay much longer. But they're definitely eligible for an additional 2 years of work experience here. So they're going to be looking at the job market and the types of jobs that are in high demand, which is probably similar to most countries. After COVID, we need healthcare, we need computer science, we need engineers, and we need teachers. So they do tend to look in those specific areas. I would say that to give a student a better shot at getting a place here and having a good experience and getting a great education, come in for perhaps a more general major, more Bachelor of Arts, Bachelor of Science, or look at some of those majors that are not as high demand. Did that answer your question, Holly? Okay, good.
We know undecided is not possible, but is it possible to change majors?
Yes, yes. So undecided would be what I've always advised students to do is choose Bachelor of Arts or Bachelor of Science. So the Bachelor of Arts, Bachelor of Science, and Bachelor of Commerce are broad range majors. And so it puts you into one of those schools. Once you enter Bachelor of Arts, you've got about 50 majors and minors available to you. Science, you'll have a similar number. You've got a wide range. So you do a Bachelor of Science, and then you choose a major in zoology or environment or something. So those are very popular in terms of the undecided. And it kind of puts you into a category. Are you doing arts and humanities, or are you doing sciences, or are you doing something in the business field?
To follow up with that question.
Yeah, go ahead, Jacqueline.
No, I was just going to follow up with that because I have some students who want to study biology, but then are also interested in music. And what happens if they straddle those particular Bachelor of Science versus Bachelor of Arts? How does that work?
We have double degree programs here. So a student doing a Bachelor of Science and a Bachelor of Music would end up doing a 4-year double degree. So
Okay.
they'll get both bachelor's degrees essentially. It will really depend on the university. And so as you look through the different universities and you look at the options for a student to study, you can enter a double degree. And some universities have on their website, they have a different way of putting those together. But it'll come up really in your application process that you'll say, I'd like to do this and also that. If there isn't the option through the application process or on the university website to choose both at the same time, then they'll apply to that one major program or the one that is their first preference. And when they arrive at the university, they speak to their student advisor and they figure out how to add that second one. But yeah, it could be a primary degree, like a major and a minor, or it could end up being a double degree.
Okay, that's great. Thank you.
Sure.
I think last, but not least, is there something similar to the common data set? Like do you know the common? I found in the chat I put like the government like to talk about stats.
Yep.
It's like age, number of years in
Yes.
like it looks like, okay, is that correct?
Yep, absolutely. Yep,
Okay.
that is just what I was going to reference was the Australian government
Okay.
education statistics.
Okay, I put that in the chat then. That
Yep.
seemed like the most. Okay. The group of 8, I'm trying to find the link to throw that in there.
Look up GO8, Melissa.
Okay. Yeah.
That's it. Yep. So the group of 8 are usually the ones you've heard of or the ones that are named after the state or the city. University of Sydney, University of Melbourne, University of Adelaide, University of Western Australia, University of Queensland. They go like that. They are our top ranked universities. They are the 8, we call them the sandstone universities. So they're kind of our Harvards. You know, they're the oldest, most established universities. They're the biggest ones. And they are the most competitive. They're research institutions. So just what you would expect of a top ranked university.
I think that's a good, I mean, that was one of my questions, like always like good place to start for our students and counselors who are looking to explore, just kind of with that understanding that they're the most popular. But yeah, with time, interest of time, happy to open it up to another question or two, or wrap up 10 minutes early. We have Christina's information, and yeah. We've done these presentations in the morning, but Christina, what time is it right now for you? Is it almost 7 a.m. now?
Almost 7 o'clock in the morning.
So
I've
thank
had
you
my coffee.
just I know, but for waking up. And I feel, we gave Christina this option. Do you want to do this at 11 o'clock at night, or 6 in the morning? And I feel for that time zone. So thank you for doing this. And we will be sending the recording out. If you have colleagues or people that you want to share this with, by all means, we'll be sharing all of this information. Yeah.
There's one more question there that I think is important. From Debbie, is there a separate application for each university or something similar to Common App? Both.
Great.
There is both. Sorry. So the university will always tell you what they take, which application they take, just like with the US. There are university specific applications, and then there is another one that's called Study Link. And when you click on Apply Now, it will either take you to that external Study Link application, or it will take you to the university's direct application. With Study Link, similar to Common App, you'll set up an account, you'll have all of your information in there, but then through Study Link, you've got to go and select the different universities where you want to apply. Okay.
I keep talking while I'm muted. Thank you everyone for joining us today, and look forward to seeing you in the future. We have some contacts put out for Ireland and Italy and Spain, so hopefully we'll keep doing these and sharing all of this great information as we roll with the times. And
Melissa, sorry to interrupt you, for the earlier ones that I didn't get a chance to see, do you have the recordings available?
Yes.
We are happy.
They're all posted on YouTube, so I can put that link in the email that we'll send out with Christina's information and stuff. Yeah.
Great.
Thank you for that. Yeah.
Thank you so much. Have a great end of June, everybody. Happy winter/summer solstice.
Thank you.
Take care, everybody. Thank you.